Okay, so we have the Mishna 2, chapter 5, Mishna 2, and we've been dealing with, this is the chapter of numbers, and it deals with different numbers. It starts off with all the tens. So the last Mishna, we talked about the 10 utterances that God used to create the world, and we spoke in great detail about the concept of 10 from many, many different angles. The most important thing to walk away with from the number 10 is that the number 10 is completion. It is an indication of a complete unit. We talked about the digits 1 through 9 were all unique digits, and then when they join together, the crescendo is number 10. Everything after 10 is just an addition. 10 plus 1, 10 plus 2, 10 plus 10, 10 plus 20. It all is just additions. And therefore, the totality of uniqueness is contained in the number 10. And that's important, that whenever you see the number 10 mentioned in the Torah, whenever you see it mentioned in Scripture, you know that it's talking about some form of completion and some form of one whole unit. So now the Mishnah teaches us Asara Doros me Adam v'ad Noach. There were 10 generations from Adam to Noah. Who were those 10 generations? Adam, Shais. Now, I'll just stop there for 1 second. Seth, who was the third son of Adam and Eve, right? There were, in fact, 2 other sons, Cain and Abel. How come they weren't listed? Because we go after all we're trying to do is to establish lineage. So to establish lineage and generations, so as generations go, so then the first generation was sort of ruined. That was Cain and Abel. So the generation that was that had a kiyum, because if you think about it, Cain was Hevel was killed, and Cain was cursed. So there was no kiyum, there was no everlastingness. There was nothing to build from with Cain and Hevel, and therefore the next son, who was Shais, that was the son that things were built from. Then there was Enosh, there was Kenan, Mehalalel, Yered, Chanoch, Mesushalach, Methuselah, Lemech, and then Noach. So why is it important to know that there were 10 generations? L'haidia, that you should know, every human being should know, that kama erech apayim, how patient God is, lefanov, before him, she'kol hadoros halalu hayu machisin uboyin, that all of these generations angered God with idolatry, with theft, with perversion, with all kinds of immoral kinds of living and existence, and they deserved to be wiped out, to be destroyed. As it says, as God said that I want to wipe out the human being that I created on the face of this earth. And it says, Kates kol basar balafane, the end of all flesh has come before me, ki mala aretz chamas mipneim, because the world is filled with chamas, with treachery. And it was only when the world was filled with chamas, that's when that was the straw that broke the camel's back, that God said, that's it, they're out of here. Nevertheless, HaKadosh Baruch Hu waited 10 generations, and he showed how patient he was by waiting 10 generations until he destroyed until he brought upon them the Mei Hamabul, in order to be able to destroy them from this world. And the only ones that were left was Noach and his children. And therefore, don't be so surprised that when he sees a wicked person that is continuing on generation after generation, that is continuing on year after year. In other words, that a person who is continuing to do evil, continuing to do horrific things, and yet seems to be living the life of Riley. Just like the Umas Ha'olam that caused the Jewish people tremendous pain and tremendous suffering, and nevertheless HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't wipe them out completely at one time. Because in the end, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to take care of them for what they've done. But that he waits patiently, and we'll see what he's waiting for in a few minutes, but that he waits patiently until that moment that they have sort of filled up the measure of wickedness, and at that moment then God is going to destroy them. So the first part of the Mishnah tells me that why is it that there are 10 generations from Adam to Noah. Why does the Torah list 10 generations? Why do I need to know that? Because I need to understand that God is patient and he waits for us to be able to, waits for us to change, waits for us to improve ourselves before he completely destroys us and removes us from the world. Now, you can ask the question of what's the moral message here? What's the ethical message? How does this help me as a human being? So I think that there's much, I have much to say, but in the simplest form, what I think that the Mishna is telling us is that you have to be very careful with deciding on a person that it's time for that person to be removed from the world, that person is totally useless, because as you can see from the patience of God, that God understands. What's God waiting for? What's God waiting for? If a person's a wicked person, a person's an evil person, is bringing evil into the world, so then what's God sitting around and waiting for? Get rid of the person. Knock him off. You know, we say on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, on Yom Kippur mostly, Ad Yom Moso Techakelo. What does that mean? Until the day of his death, God waits for him. God waits for a person until the very, very last moment, the very last moment of a person's life, that a person is going to do tshuva, a person is going to change, a person can wake up. You know, I remember in our yeshiva, and I think I've told this before, but in our yeshiva, there was a great reluctance to throw anybody out of the yeshiva. And even though there were guys who were really not fitting for the yeshiva, there was a tremendous reluctance to throw guys out of yeshiva. And I was once on the chopping block. After my first year in yeshiva, I had come to the yeshiva as really not understanding what a yeshiva was. I didn't come from a yeshiva background. I came from a more modern background. I had a black hat. I had never seen a black hat. I had no idea what it was. And yet I was learning in a black hat yeshiva. I just don't understand what a yeshiva bacher was. I didn't understand what the whole system was. And I was a bit of a pain in the neck because of that. And after my first year, when yeshiva starts, a lot of times, even now, I'm listening to parents saying that, school's starting tomorrow. We're going on vacation. Shkoyach. Yeah, anyway, since everything's on Zoom, what difference does it make? Like, there's a very laissez-faire, there's a very lackadaisical attitude. In yeshiva, there's no such thing as a lackadaisical attitude. Yeshiva starts Rosh Chodesh Elul. It starts on the first of the month of Elul. My son-in-law learns in yeshiva that they started a day before Rosh Chodesh Elul. Just to grab it. And Elul is the most intense month. The learning is incredibly intense. The davening is incredibly intense. You don't miss Elul. So after my first year in yeshiva, I went to Eretz Yisrael for a summer, and I came back 2 weeks late to yeshiva. And it was like, for me, like, what's the big deal, man? You come 2 weeks late. Like, so it's no big deal. You're sitting and learning all day long. So great. So you start 2 weeks late. What difference does it make? Well, the problem is when you come 2 weeks late, the whole yeshiva system is based on chavrusas, based on study partners. I didn't have a study partner. And if anybody wanted to learn, I wasn't a particularly well-integrated person that anybody really wanted to spend their time learning with me. I was more like, a stalker case, to figure out, to give me time and to try to teach me some Torah. So I couldn't find anybody to learn with. So they called my father. And I said to my father, you remember when your son came here, what he told us is that he was coming to this yeshiva for a year. I was supposed to go to another yeshiva in Israel, and it didn't work out. I chickened out at the last moment, and I didn't want to go with my parents to be so far away. So I decided not to go. But at that point, I couldn't get into college. There's nothing to do. So my father said to me, listen, I learned in yeshiva in Baltimore. Why don't you go learn there for a year, and then you go to yeshiva university afterwards? All right. So they said to my father, remember your son, when he came, he said that he thought that after a year he would go to YU. We think it might be a good idea. So my father says, look, I talked to him, but he really wants to stay in yeshiva. He's enjoying it. He likes the yeshiva. So they told him the whole story. We can't find him anybody. And they said to my father, maybe you'll pay a little extra money, and we'll hire somebody to learn with him. So my father said, no, I'm not paying extra money. I can't afford what I'm already paying. So I'm not paying extra money. My kid's your responsibility. Find them a chavrusa. So the yeshiva found me an older man. An older guy. He wasn't married. I think maybe he was 50. He wasn't married, and he sat with me. He saved my life. This guy, and I've seen him subsequent to these years, and I feel so much when I see him Like, mamish, this guy saved my life. He taught me how to learn. He sat patiently with me. He wouldn't take any of my shtick. And he just sat there. And when I say sat there, we sat together about 8 hours a day, just sitting and learning. It wasn't like you could shoot the breeze with this guy. There was no breeze. It didn't blow around him. He had nothing to say. He had nothing. It was like he was just Torah. That was it. He was just a person who learned Torah, and he gave me such an incredible love for Torah and ability to be able to learn Torah. Was amazing. Okay, and the rest is history. You know, I am what I am. I made it to where I made it to, and it's all good. So one of the rabbis in the yeshiva once said to me that they were having a conversation. There was a certain bacher that they felt that they needed to throw out of the yeshiva. He wasn't amounting to anything. So one of the rabbis said, you can't throw him out. So I can't throw him out. Look, he does this, he does this, he does this. He doesn't understand the yeshiva. So he looks at him and he goes, remember Wogelernter? So I became the poster child for not throwing people out of yeshiva because you never know what they could amount to. It was funny. I was once asked to speak at the yeshiva dinner. So first of all, I thought it was a big joke. You know, me to speak at the yeshiva dinner. Usually at the yeshiva dinner, there's like 1,000 people, and they get the biggest rabbis in the world to speak. And they asked me, it was like a joke. So, as a matter of fact, when they called me up to ask me, there was the rabbi that called me to ask me has a very distinct voice. He spoke like he had marbles in his mouth. He had a German accent. He had a very, very distinct voice. And he calls me. There was a guy in yeshiva who was like a Rich Little, and he was able to imitate all the rabbis. I was convinced that it was that guy calling me. This would have been the second time he did this to me. One time he walked into my room in the morning, in the middle of the morning. I was sleeping. He walks in and he puts on the voice of the mashgiach, of the dean of men, the guy who woke up guys who were sleeping in late, and he puts on his voice, and. So I thought that he was putting on his voice because he had done it to me so many times. So I said from under my blanket, I said, Harry Karp. I said, will you shut up? And I looked up and it was my rabbi. It wasn't good. It wasn't that guy. So I thought that for sure this was the second time that he was doing the same thing. It wasn't. They asked me to speak. Good. Now you have to imagine. I am what they say, tzitterin in my gatkas. I'm shaking in my undergarments. I'm so nervous. I'm standing with mamish, the greatest rabbis of America. I'm sitting on the dais. They put me on the dais. I don't think I was 35. I don't think I was 35 yet. And it was just, the whole thing was just so surreal and crazy to me. My Rebbe was sitting there, Rabbi Friend, and the Rosh Hashiva, and all the holy rabbis. So I stand up, and I say that when Rabbi Newberger called me and asked me if I would speak at the dinner, I couldn't stop laughing. I just thought it was the funniest thing in the whole world. I stopped. I looked out at the audience and I said, for those of you that don't know me, you're thinking, wow, what a humble guy. I said, for those of you that know me, you're thinking, Taka, it's pretty funny. So as soon as I said that, my Rosh Hashiva laughed. As soon as he laughed, I calmed down a little bit. But you never know where a person's going to turn. You never know on what a person's going to turn. You never know at what moment a person can change their lives. We have a concept called Yesh Kona Olama B'Shah Achas, that a person can change his life in 1 second. There are so many stories in the Talmud of people, wicked people, that were going in one direction in their life, and then they had an epiphany, they had an event that happened, and their lives turned around. That's the incredible thing about human beings, that you can't lose hope because you can change in 1 second. It's possible for a person to turn on a dime. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's possible. And therefore, what God is saying to us is that what the Mishna is saying to us is that just like God waited and waited and waited and waited patiently for us to turn, for each generation to turn and to become that beautiful generation, then that's the lesson that we have to wait for each other to turn, to change. A person that we're having a difficulty with, a person that we have lost hope in, a person that we feel has really gone south. Our obligation is to wait and be patient like God was patient, because it is possible for a person to change. It's a beautiful message. That many of those people that we write off, Many of those people that we have put in a box, they're not necessarily in a box. And they can break out of that box and really accomplish something amazing. And it's the same for ourselves. That when we sometimes hit those places, those ruts, that we look at ourselves and we say, I can't believe I let myself become this. And I feel powerless to change myself. Understand and know you have that ability to be able to change yourself. And just like God was patient, and ad yomoso techakalo, until it's over, it isn't over. Yogi Berra got that from the Torah, right? That until it ain't over till it's over. And that God waits and waits for that moment. We have to do that in ourselves also. Beautiful message. And again, I can develop this, I can go further with it, but let's look at the rest of the Mishnah. Asara doros minoach v'ad Avram. There were 10 generations from Noah until Abraham. Lahudia kama erech hapayim lefonav. So that you should know how much patience God has. Shekol adoros ma'ayu machisinu bayim, that all the generations angered God, ad sheba Avram, until Abraham came, kibul alav schar kulam, and he received the reward for all of them. Ladies and gentlemen, look at that very carefully, please. Let's read the Mishnah again. I'll tell you what, let's do an exercise. I'll read the first part of the Mishnah, and you read the second part of the Mishnah while I'm reading it. Okay? Everybody ready? Asara dorot minoach v'yad Avram, me'adam v'yad Noach. Okay, so it's exactly the same, it's just different names. Okay? Lehodia kama erech hapayim lefanov. Same thing. Shekola dorot hayu machisinu bayin, all the generations angered God. Ad shehevi aleim et mei hamabul, until he brought the waters of destruction, the waters of the flood. In your half of the Mishnah that you were reading, it says Ad sheba Avram v'kibul alav schar kulam, until Abraham came and got reward for all the 10 generations. So what's the same between the first two halves of the Mishnah? That they angered God, and each generation angered God, and yet God was incredibly patient. What's different between, besides the names, but what's different between the two halves of the Mishnah? Noah came, and God brought the flood waters on them. Second half of the Mishnah, Abraham came and got reward for all 10 generations. Okay, so what's the message of the second half of the Mishnah? Forget about that very last part. What's the message? God's patient. What's the message of the first part of the Mishnah? God's patient. I need two pieces to teach me that. It's a beautiful message, but it's not that complicated. It doesn't take that much for me to learn that message. So what's going on here? Why do we have a first half of the Mishnah and a second half of the Mishnah that seem to be exactly the same? Second problem. Why did Noah, when it was 10 generations from Adam to Noah, generations were angering God, God was patient, and then what happened? Foot dropped, boot dropped, and the Mabul came. Abraham, 10 generations from Noah to Abraham, and what happens at the end after they anger God and God is patient? And then Abraham receives reward for all 10 generations. Problem number one, what does that mean to receive reward for all 10 generations? It's problem number one. Problem number two, I don't understand why it is that Noah gets a flood and Abraham wins the lottery. What was the difference between the two of them? Noah was a great guy. What does the Torah say about Noah? Ish tzaddik, tamim hoya b'doresav. He was a righteous person in his generation. So you know the famous rabbinical statement about that? Yesh dorshim l'shvach v'dorshim l'gnai. There are those that expound it to the positive side and those that expound it to the negative side. There are those that say that Noach was an ish tzaddik, he was a righteous person. Tamim hayah, he was pure. b'dorosov in his generation. But if he would have been in somebody else's generation, he wouldn't have been such a big tzaddik. He was a tzaddik because everybody else was so schlecht, was so terrible. But if he was in another generation, he wouldn't have been such a good guy. And there are those that look at it and say that Noah lived in such a schlechter generation, and nevertheless he was able to rise to the top. He was really a magnificent person. Ish tzaddik tamimayo b'dorosov. Imagine in a world like that you can develop a Noah, you can produce a Noah. That's an incredible world. That's an incredible person. That's an incredible tzaddik, incredible righteous person. You have to wonder, what does the Torah call Noah? Ish tzaddik. Tamim, pure, whole. Why do you need to run him down? Why do you need to say, well, yeah, in his generation he was a good guy, but if he was in another generation, he wouldn't have been much. If he was in Abraham's generation, Abraham would have been the chief, the prince, and what would Noah have been? Noch schlepper. He's nothing. What do you need to run the guy down for? What does it say in the Torah? It doesn't say Noah was mediocre. Is that what it says? It doesn't say Noah was you and I. It doesn't say that. And by the way, you and I are not in the Torah. Noah is. It's got to say something about the guy. Ish tzaddik tamimaya. So why are we running him down? Why are we looking at him negative? Why does Noah get a flood and Abraham gets first prize? So I'll tell you what I think is going on here. I think that we need to understand why we're taught about patience 2 times in this Mishnah. Does everybody understand my question when I ask that? Because both halves in the Mishnah are ultimately teaching about patience. Because I think what the Mishnah is teaching me is that there's 2 types of patience. There's patience of handling somebody's shtick. You know, a person's annoying, person's pressing your buttons with both hands. It's a person who's just in your face all the time. And you're patient with them. You don't let them get under your skin. You don't let them destroy you. You don't let them ruin who you are. And you're just patient with them. You talk softly to them. You smile at them. And you exercise an incredible amount of power and patience. But there's a second level of patience. You know, in the first level of patience, you're rolling your eyes inside. Person asks, you know those students that always ask ridiculous questions? You know, you say Paul Revere was riding on a white horse. The person says, what color was Paul Revere's horse? Every teacher's got one of those. The patient teacher looks at the student and says, oh, it was white. Inside they're saying, you moron, it was white. Don't you listen? I just said it was white. But outside, a paragon of patience. But there's a second level of patience. And the second level of patience is that not only am I patient, though I am treating you patiently, but I am impatient internally, but I am patient to the extent that I embrace you even while you are going after me. Even while you're in my face, even while you're causing me a degree of pain, I'm still trying to embrace you. And not only am I embracing you, but I am handling everything you're doing, and I'm trying to find the positive in you and in what you do. Because ultimately all I want to do is draw you closer to me. Even in your annoyingness, even in your smallness and all the crazy things you're doing, I patiently work through all of that because all I ultimately want is I want a relationship with you. What was the difference between Avram and Noach? You know, Noach is building an ark for 120 years. You know it took him that long? 120 years. Can you imagine? You live in Noah's neighborhood. middle of Mesopotamia. It's not like there was a Mesopotamian yacht club. Yeah, no, what they know from boats in the middle of Mesopotamia. Noah's sitting there and hacking and clapping away. Every day he's hacking and hacking and hacking. You walk past him the first day and you say to him, Noah, how you doing? What are you doing? And Noah says, building a boat. And you go, oh, what's a boat? And Noah explains, there's going to be rain. Oh, what's rain? God is going to make water come out of the sky and it's going to inundate the world. You're going to drown if you don't repent. Wow. Sounds cool. Can't wait. And you do this, you have this conversation 365 times 120. I don't have a calculator sitting in front of me, but that's a big number. And then it starts to rain. And what do? Nothing. You don't buy a ticket. You don't ask for passage on the boat. You see Noah's gathering all the animals. You don't go quack, 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 take me too, right? Nothing. You don't care. How is that possible? That 120 years of listening to a message of doom and gloom, and you don't make the slightest of a move when it starts to rain and everything Noah said was going to happen comes true. Let's look at Abraham. Abraham never said, repent now, for tomorrow you will die. Abraham never told anybody that if they don't come into his tent and make a bracha, their tongue is going to fall out and God is going to throw his wrath upon them. He never talked like that. Avraham Avinu would invite you into a tent. He would say, what'd you like to eat? I'll have a corned beef sandwich. No problem. But you got to wash and make a bracha before the sandwich. What's a bracha? Oh, let me tell you what a bracha is. And Avraham Avinu would tell him about a bracha. People started to make blessings, and eventually everybody believed in God. Never threatened, no raindrops falling on my head, nothing negative. And Avraham Avinu turned around the entire world. What was the difference? What Noah was saying to them is that your world is corrupt. There's something wrong with your behavior. But he offered them no model of what could be better. He didn't give them any kind of option. He didn't give them any kind of characterization. He didn't give them anything to look at and to say, what I'm doing is bad, but that's a better way to live. All he was doing was threatening them and telling them that if you don't fix that, then you are going to be destroyed. He didn't show them a new life. He didn't show them a better way. All he did was offer a threat. And that goes nowhere. For a person who is a nervous person, it might help them. But for the average person, you threaten them, it's only going to make them stronger in what they do. There was a period of time when many Jews ran to cults, 70s, 80s. There was a very famous rabbi by the name of Rabbi Shia Hecht, who went around to cults and he targeted Yiddish kids and he kidnapped them out of the cults. He would bring them to hotels, lock them in their rooms, and for days he would deprogram them. And then he would send them off to Jewish programs. He was a Chabad rabbi. He would send them to Chabad programs. But he spoke very much about the fact that where there were many cult busters, that would bring them out, deprogram them, but do nothing with them. And it was just a short time until they would run back to the cults. What he would do is he would deprogram them and show them a better way, show them a different lifestyle. That was Avraham Avinu. What Avraham Avinu was doing is that he was breaking them. He was showing them, this is a better way. This is an alternative. This is a new way. It's a path of growth. And when every single person changed their lives to live a life like Abraham, Avraham Avinu had a chelek. He had a portion of everybody's success. It says, "Ves hanefesh asher asu becharon." It says, and the nefesh and the souls that he made. What does it mean, the souls that he made? Every single student that he had, he invested himself in that student to teach them a better way of life. And therefore, their successes were his successes. They were a part of him. If you can remember back to the first Mishna in Pirkey Avos, the very first Mishna, about 6,795 years ago, right? The first Mishna that we learned. And what did that Mishna say? What were the three things that the men of the Great Assembly said? One of them was, Ha'amidu Talmidim Harbe. Stand up many students. Don't just teach them, but give them something, legs to stand on. Give them a new life to live. Give them a new perspective, a new path of growth. And that's why Avraham Avinu got the reward for every one of those 10 generations. Because Avraham Avinu had an investment in every single success of the offspring of every one of those generations, of flipping them around and turning them into incredible human beings. Avraham Avinu had a portion of the reward of every single generation. Noah scared the heck out of him. Noah frightened the world, but accomplished nothing. And therefore Noah got no reward. He got no chelek, no portion in anybody's successes, because there were no successes. Because that methodology can't work. The first 10 generations from Adam to Noah had tremendous patience by God. But in the second 10 generations, there was even more patience, because God remained connected and involved. And that's our whole purpose of our existence. Avraham Avinu taught them the meaning of life, that we need to be involved with God, we need to be connected with Him. And that as long as we ultimately had that goal, so then God continued to be patient and involved, hands-on with us, until in fact it all changed. And I think that the Mishna is teaching us about these two different types of patience. Being patient, waiting, it's a good thing. Handling somebody's bad behavior, it's a good thing. But staying involved with them because you're concerned about them, because you really want to make a change in them, you really want to help them, and that means I'm going to take what you do to me, but I'm still going to be involved with you. It's not going to chase me away from you. You know, there's a book which I speak about often called Torah Torah, the palm tree of Devorah. In that book, the palm tree of Devorah, Rav Moshe Cordovero, a great Kabbalist, takes the midos, the 13 divine attributes of God, and he shows us how to incorporate them into our lives. And his main theme is the kind of patience that God has with man, we have to have with other people. that while God is giving us gifts and presents and lifting us up, we are spitting in his face. We are doing an avera transgression at the very moment that he's giving us the gift of life. The very moment that God is allowing us to take another breath, we're using that to speak Lashon Hara. We're using that to say something or do something that is against God. And yet God patiently embraces us. And he says, no, I'm going to be part of you. I'm not going to throw you away. You're Sheiris Nachalaso. You are a part and a parcel of me. And when we have that kind of patience, because that kind of patience is not about me. That kind of patience is about you. See, the first kind of patience is about me being a good person. I know that I'm supposed to be a patient person. It's one of the good midos that I'm supposed to develop, and therefore I'm going to handle whatever you do. But it's not because I care about you, it's because I care about me, which is important, but I'm worried about my development. I'm worried about the kind of person I'm going to become, and therefore I'm going to be patient with you. But that's superficial patience. Real patience is that because I love you so much, and because I worry about you so much, I will handle your shtick. Because I know that that's the way it's going to change for you. That's the thing around which your entire change and your betterment, your improvement is dependent upon that. And when I have that kind of patience, then I share in your successes. And that's the difference between Adam and Noah. The mission is not repeating itself. The mission is not telling me just twice that God is patient. The mission is teaching me about these two different types of patience. Patience because I need to be patient, but patience because I love you, and therefore I'm going to be patient with you. Patience that centers around me is tenuous patience. Because at the end of the day, if I'm not feeling it, I'm tired, I'm annoyed, patience is going to dry. Because it's just about me, and right now, I'm not feeling it. But if it's about you, and it's about my commitment to you, and I care about you, that kind of patience will endure. That kind of patience can create incredible fruit, incredible peros. That's my thought. I think an important idea about how really to be patient with other people. You know, there's a book that just came out. There was a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Trink, who 45 years ago started a yeshiva for guys that weren't making it in the standard yeshivas. Now today, those kinds of yeshivas are a dime a dozen. But he started a yeshiva that was so unique. Somebody once asked him, you know, what the secret is. And he said, just love them. And they named this, he just died. They wrote a book about him, and they named the book, Just Love Them. And I don't care what it says in that book, but you see a picture of this rabbi with the biggest smile on his face, with the title of the book, Just Love Them. That is the key to success. If you want to help another human being, it's not about, I want to do chesed. I want to be a kind person. Wonderful, thank you. But it's not what about that. I love that person, and therefore I want to help them succeed. That will help others succeed. I think that that's really the message of this Mishnah. That this Mishnah is teaching me about what real patience is, what real ability to help another person change. Just love them. And when you love them, then you can help them grow. You can help them become better human beings. Okay, I think we'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very good.
My pleasure. Thank
Rabbi,
you.
Rabbi, that was wonderful.
Thank you very much. It was really good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rabbi, it occurs to me what you're saying is it's it's a very paternalistic patience that you want for your kid. That's how you're going to treat your kid. And further, that's maybe like Abraham is Avinu, and like.
I can't believe you just said that. No, I can't believe you just said that. No, why am I getting so excited about it? Because just look carefully how we call Abraham in today's Mishnah. Asara Doros Mei Noach Ad Avraham. No mention of his last name. Doesn't say Avinu. Right? Avram Goldberg, Avram Avinu. Right? Doesn't say his last name. Doesn't say Avinu. You saw that?
Mhm.
Look at the next Mishnah. Asara Nisyonos
Avinu.
Nisnasa Avram Avinu. Wait a second. How come in this Mishnah it just calls him Abraham? And in the next Mishnah it calls him Abraham Avinu. You got to come back next week.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you very much. That was really good.
It's great to see you. Great to see your name.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to see everybody. Good
Thank
night.
you, Rabbi. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Lost internet connection in the middle, so I missed a few parts, but I'll get the recording to grab it later.
Yeah. It'll be online.
Great, thanks. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I have to remember to unrecord.